Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the now 28-year-old voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 7 Episode 9, As Above, So Below. But before we get started, as always, please watch this episode first through roosterteeth.com to support the show and avoid spoilers. Thanks to all of you who gave some comments in the last review, which, as you would imagine, a lot of it was in regards to the ongoing drama in the Schnee family. We had Mel and Tart VA who shared their joy in finally seeing Mama Willow and Winter snapping at Jacques, while also sharing their take on what could happen with Whitley. On the note of the younger Schnee kid, Psyche wonders if Weiss might try to mend things with her brother by offering him the head of the SDC position, especially since that really is all that he has left to claim as his own. And finally, on a different subject, Hellfire Reigns is wondering what could happen if Penny is faced with the choice of who to protect, Atlas or Mantle. As ever, please do share your thoughts on this latest episode in the comments down below, and tune in next week to see if you can spot it in the next viewer section. So, the last episode of 2019 left with quite its fair share of tension and emotion. We finally got to see Willow in a very heartbreaking scene, while her husband was putting Ironwood under immense pressure, before the episode ended with a sign of freezing turmoil to come for Mantle. While not the most grand of pre-Christmas episodes, it still was gripping to say the least. But as we broke into the new decade, was this episode able to carry on where the volume left off? Or was it a rough beginning to RWBY's 2020? Let's find out. With the cold front bearing down on sections of Mantle without heating, the people are seeking any kind of shelter they can, with the aid of Pietro and Maria. Meanwhile, up top, Ironwood is still getting questioned by his fellow councilmen, the topic now switching to concerns over him having 2 seats and his dubious nature of his recent actions without council support. All of this is of course music to Jacques' ears, the smug-ass loving every second of the general struggles. But a spanner is thrown into the works as he's soon updated on the heating grid being shut down under his orders, or at least under the orders forged by Watts. Clearly this wasn't part of Jacques' plans, and now his arrogance is shaken as he tries to process things. But the interrogation continues as Robin wants to know what it is that Ironwood is keeping so tight-lipped about that he wouldn't even share his plans with the rest of the council. And she has a surefire way to get right to the truth. A semblance. But before Jacques is forced to comply, in comes Ace Attorney Weiss Schnee with the mother of all objections! She's here with the real truths. And I'm not talking about Jacques wearing clip-on ties like a heathen. Yes, I have seen Arnold's video, definitely go check it out in the links provided, cause it's an absolute laugh riot. No, instead, Weiss drops the camera footage bomb that Jacques has worked hand in hand with Arthur Watts. By the way, apparently Watts' fake death is in relation to something called the Paladin Incident, which sounds like the Doctor caused some kind of accident involving the Atlesian Paladins, like some kind of explosion to hide his escape. That would explain then why we didn't see those giant mechs until Volume 2, and even then, the models we saw at first were prototypes, suggesting that Watts definitely made quite the damaging impact on the production side. Either way, the video footage is played, disclosing the rest of Jacques' talk with Watts, who asked for his network login credentials in exchange for helping Jacques win the election, so long as he causes strife on Ironwood. Seems like Watts has a personal grudge with the General, feeling like he dismissed his talents, ultimately being responsible as well for his disgraced status. I very much like this new insight. It's often been said that the villains of RWBY have had mixed to lacking explanations for why they are bad guys and why they side with Salem. But with this, Watts has probably the most straightforward and logical excuse, wanting vengeance upon those that he felt wronged him, and he's more than happy to work with someone like Salem because she sees worth in his genius. It doesn't have the logic flaw that Hazel has with his reason for working with the leader of the Grimm. It's more purposeful to the story than Tyrion's adoration for his savior, and it's certainly more fleshed out than Cinder's lacking motivations in why she wants to gain power. It's a massive boon in the mad scientist's positives that, on top of this well-crafted role that he has had in this volume so far, helps solidify him as a villain with actual depth behind his actions. Back on track, and boy do I just love seeing Jacques squirm. His confidence is lost as he has to sit and listen to his own scheming unravel his plans. He even goes as far as to claim that the footage isn't real, as a weak attempt to save his skin, before deciding to flee like the coward he really is. Thankfully, his exit is blocked by Weiss's Summer Night, with the Ice Queen getting the joyous satisfaction of personally placing her father under arrest. I don't care if she can't do that, she deserves this moment, and I absolutely adore all the tasty layers that it contains. In regards to the night, not only is it poignant to see Jacques' efforts halted by something that he once used to try and break Weiss's hopes of becoming a huntress, it's also fun to envision the weight behind the being wearing armor similar to that of Nicholas Schnee. Like the SDC founder is standing there to make sure that the man who broke his family and poisoned his company pays for his crimes. Then you got Weiss, who, like I said, has to have some personal joy in being the one to put Jacques under arrest, especially through her newly gained position as a pro-huntress, a position that Jacques has constantly tried to stop her from obtaining. It's been a long time coming, but Weiss has finally been able to make Jacques be held accountable for his actions, and to see her do so with absolute conviction and maturity really makes this moment feel special as someone who's watched her grow over the volumes. Sadly, there is still the ongoing issues down in Mantle, as Watts and Tyrion hit the streets while the people begin to break shops and start fires. Though sticking with these two, I am surprised that they are still in the city. I figured the next step of their plans was to head to Atlas and look for the staff, or get away from the city now that the damage looks to be done before Salem's forces arrive. But both of them still being in Mantle suggests that there's more to do here, and I think it's to do with the Winter Maiden, Freya. They will of course need her power after all if they want to get into the vault, so I'm willing to bet that their next stop is the military base that she's housed in, which could be in Mantle if this shot from the last episode seems to be suggesting. Back in the Schnee household, and the Kingpin is getting his turn in the interrogation hot seat, all under the glaring eyes of Ironwood and a painting of Nicholas Schnee. Very nice touch there. Jacques keeps trying to protest his innocence from Ironwood's accusations, but at the very least, this helps clarify who's to blame for the murders in Mantle, and Penny can now be cleared of all the blame that she's had for the deaths at the rally. But this, and Jacques looking like he's facing jail time for treason and aiding in murder, is little comfort to Robin, who's furious that Jacques keeps ignoring how his selfish wants benefited from the deaths of innocents. To make matters worse, everyone now hears about the heat and grit issue, and any efforts to get Jacques to fix it falls flat since he's been locked out of the network. With Watts having free reign of the Atlas network, things aren't looking good for Mantle nor Atlas, and though Watts hasn't gone to the files of the Amity Project yet, it's only a matter of time before he does, and the hero's best efforts to take on Salem goes up in smoke. The goal now is to somehow find Watts in the city and stop him before he can cause more trouble. But Robin chimes back into the conversation, wanting to know why these random people are pairing up with each other to go against Ironwood, and why even now the general is keeping silent on the Amity Communications Tower, finally revealing that she is aware of it, much to Ironwood's surprise. All the truths are coming out, though the fact that Robin got this information from Blake and Yang doesn't get touched on, which kinda comes as a bit of a surprise, the main deal instead being that Robin knows of this and that she wants answers. I do hope there is some kind of backlash to their gambit, or at least some talk about it, since it was such a bold move behind the others' backs, but I understand as why this is not really the time for it. But before we can hear more from this, we check in again on Mantle, where tensions are heating up like the flames to where civilians are now attacking military drones. All of this is creating a powder keg of negative emotions, which of course means a swarm of Grimm are on its way, including our first look at what has to be Mega Goliaths, the woolly mammoth variants of the Goliath Grimm that can take missile fire like a champ, making things easy for them and some sabers to make a beeline for the still damaged walls of the city, alongside another new Grimm soaring in from the shadows, which we'll see again later. Returning to Atlas, and Robin has now come to realize that despite Ironwood's secrecy, he is trying to do what's best for the kingdom, maybe even the world, and she can see that Ironwood's intentions are good, so as such, Robin shares her trust in him, but only if she gets the trust returned with the knowledge of his plans, finally hoping to bridge the gap between them. However, Ironwood then has to deal with news from Clover and Oscar about the incoming Grimm, and suddenly his worst fears are coming true. Once again, even with his best efforts, the enemy is winning and his kingdom is under threat. The pained reaction from the general looks very heartbreaking, backed by the insight that we have from the last episode that shows that he's been struggling with his past failures. But unlike last time, when he had to deal with most of these bad circumstances mostly on his own, Ironwood does have welcome support, the first of it provided by Oscar. Not long ago, Ironwood clearly preferred Ozpin's advice, not the young farm boys, but Oscar is still here and wants Ironwood to realize now is the time to come clean about the secrets that he's tried to keep. He's already chosen to go against what Ozpin likely would have said by trusting Penny, Winter, and the Aesops with the existence of Salem. And now things are starting to get out of his control, it's best that he lays all his cards on the table before his kingdom falls. And again, he's not alone. He has RWBY and company, his forces, and now the aid of Robin willing to help him fight back. And this does help ease Ironwood's mind for the time being so he can form a new plan. First up, the Council and Robin will be informed on the existence of Salem. Then the general can go hunt for Watts and Tyrion. Meanwhile, everyone else will head into the city to protect the citizens, though Oscar will remain in the academy, likely so he can protect the relics. It would be a shame to not have Oscar join the fight in some capacity, but I very much suspect that someone will break into the academy grounds, so I expect to see the young lad get his hands dirty at some point. I am worried though about Ironwood seemingly going solo to find Watts and Tyrion. I mean, I doubt Watts would be much of a problem for him combat-wise, but with Tyrion involved, he might be a bit too much for Ironwood to handle. We'll have to wait and see. With the orders given, the huntsmen head on out, past a staff member whose smirk I'm sure isn't hinting towards something odd and malicious. Nope, not at all. Instead, let's focus on this really charming moment with RWBY and Oscar, fumbling over each other's sandwiches before agreeing that they should come clean about their secrets and tell Ironwood what they've learned about Salem, with Oscar choosing to take the lead since RWBY is needed elsewhere. It's a short little moment, but a warm one for these two, as I really do enjoy their bond, and it's very, very good to see Oscar keep up this good form of him looking to aid where he can, especially since he too had to overcome some of his own doubts and fears. It still makes me wish we had seen last volume before his self-acceptance, but either way, it is still a cute moment for the pair, their interaction is adorable, and it's great to see them finally come clean on the back of Ironwood doing the same. Any longer, and that might have made things very hypocritical and potentially damaging to the hero's actions. And so, the fighters head on into Mantle, with Clover highlighting that the priority is the safety of the citizens, not killing Grimm. It's notable too that we see Ren have a crestfallen look on his face, which I feel has to be due to him recalling how a similar situation befell his hometown. At least Nora is there to give him a little gesture of support, which after all their recent highs and lows, still makes me smile. Regardless of their differing issues lately, they do still care about each other, and will stand by the other side when they need it. They just need to have a good long talk about what's caused their recent friction. Still, it's a nice little bit of show don't tell with how the scene is portrayed, alongside a small look shared between Blake and Yang. I got a good understanding of the emotions at play without it being spelled out to me in words, when the pair's expressions can say plenty on their own, so plus points earned there for sure. Another directive touch that I have to applaud is when we return to Atlas, where the Council and Robin have been told about Salem, and we have this excellent match cut from Robin to a shocked Ironwood. Not only is that a very cool transition, but it also ties in to the fantastic third directive touch by us returning to the conversation after Ironwood got the truth. As Eddie has pointed out over on Klaxon's review, they didn't have the scene repeat information that we the viewer already know, a massive issue that many of us did have during Volume 5. Instead, we arrived just as things got to the most important details, that being Ironwood's reaction, without having to sit through an abridged rundown of everything we've known for quite a while now, keeping the pace snappy and focused. But yeah, Ironwood finally knows what Jin revealed in her visions, which also means that Ironwood is aware Jin has one more question to offer. Makes me wonder if he'll try to use it, but unless he thinks he has the perfect question, that might be too big a risk to play if the answer isn't conclusive. Regardless, Ironwood is left stunned that Salem seemingly can't be killed, and surprisingly, instead of feeling betrayed by Oscar and the others for keeping this a secret until now, his biggest confusion is over Ozpin hiding this from him for all this time. I would have thought that he'd be a little sour that those he seemed to trust from the start didn't return the favour, but I guess such a personal body blow on his opinion of someone that he very much respects and admires definitely would hurt more than anything from the others, and Oscar's honesty might also be helping soften the blow. That and the more pressing issue right now of protecting Mantle, which thankfully Ironwood does remain focused on. This pleases Oscar too, him believing that Ironwood is now truly starting to live up to what Atlas was meant to achieve back when it first became this floating city, a symbol meant to inspire hope in the people for a better world. Quite the empowering statement from the young lad, and Ironwood comments that it's almost like Oscar was there, speaking about Atlas's early days from experience. Looks like Oscar has started to meld memories with Ozpin as another step in their soul fusion, which is equal parts positive for this situation and concerning for the fate of Oscar. He still sounded and acted like his normal self, but with Ozpin's memories starting to blend into his own thoughts, our fears about Oscar slowly starting to lose his sense of self as he becomes the next Ozpin is starting to grow, which makes the sweet moment with RWBY earlier feel kind of depressing in retrospective. I really do hope that there is some way to keep Oscar remaining his own person, even if he started to accept his fate. but with this first example of the fusion being active in more ways than just the combat skills, the final fate of Oscar is treading some thin ice already. And speaking of worrying signs, we then rejoin the main group as the airship is attacked by the shadowy new Grimm. Meet Terry the Terex, a pterodactyl like Grimm that gives this flight a new kind of turbulence, much to the poor Vomit Boy's dismay. And Terry too comes barreling in to wreck one of the wings, meaning that it's time to ditch the ride and head into the city. And I don't know what's more oddly funny, Elm saying the obvious in "don't stay in the burning plane" to Harriet, or Weiss doing a little spin as she jumps out. It also looks like we've now got 3 separate groups heading into Mantle, Ruby and Harriet being one pair, while Clover and Crow are the other, the last being to leave as well, with another charming moment with these two. Everyone else though is going to be seemingly in one large group, and that should be fun to see, at least in terms of everyone working together again in a more intense situation than the dust mine battles. But it's not all fun and games, as back at the Schnee Manor, Jacques is being carted away in handcuffs. And sure, this is a very pleasing sight for us to see, but there is the after effects that this will follow on to the family, as we spot a sullen Whitley evade his mother's look and run away to sulk on his own. As rough as it is for Whitley to have been Jacques' heir, we should keep in mind that that really was the only real family connection that he had of some benefit. Willow was far too distant in her drunken woes, and his sisters left home for their own goals. Jacques, meanwhile, may have been the craptastic father that he is, but without him, Whitley has no one left to lean on for comfort and support. It's going to take a long time for anyone in this family to mend the broken ties between them, and with Willow's comments about wanting Weiss to keep her brother in her thoughts, it'll be curious to see how Weiss handles things with her brother now Jacques is seemingly out of the picture, for the time being at least. But as the episode begins to wrap up, we follow that totally not suspicious staff worker as she skips happily away. Nothing devious here at all. Look, we even see her home, and her roommate Cinder. Oh, wait. Yep, the bitch is back, and so too is her current partner in crime, at least for the moment, Neo, who has disguised herself as a member of Jacques' staff, seemingly in the hopes of trying to find where RWBY is. She even appeared in the previous episode too, so nice consistency there. But I have to wonder, did Neo also hear some other details during her time there? Did she perhaps listen in on the Amity Tower being mentioned, or Oscar staying in the academy? If so, then such details could be something that they keep in their back pockets for their next plans, while at least now for the moment focusing first and foremost on RWBY. As if there wasn't enough reasons to panic. Wow, what a jam-packed episode this was! Right from the off, this episode was a constant string of one engrossing scene to the next, with some more masterful directing work at play, a dash of comedy here or there, and some delightful interactions as well sprinkled about the blood-pumping setup for what should be a hot volume finale. Not once did I feel overwhelmed or lacking interest, though maybe there was perhaps a few too many cuts back and forth between Atlas and Mantle, but it all helped in some way to progressing the ongoing conflicts in a manner that did still keep me hooked without much complaint. There's a lot of scenes in this episode that I will happily savor on for some time, one of the biggest being Jacques' oh so glorious downfall. Getting to see Jacques' bravado crumble before his very eyes was all kinds of satisfying, aided by some well-crafted expression and scene composition work, the previously explored depth in the arrest scene, and Jason Douglas absolutely killing it again in this role, bringing out all the gross smugness and the fragile cowardice that really sold his downward spiral. Part of me though still feels like there's more to come from Jacques, especially in regards to the fate of the SDC and the next developments of the Schnee family drama, which I'm glad was left on a sour and fractured note. Things aren't suddenly 100% grand again just cause Jacques is in cuffs. There's clearly a lot of wounds that still need to heal, and I can't imagine it being smooth sailing for this family to try and come together after all these years, more so with Willow and Whitley, but also with the sisters as well and their brother. Hopefully we will get more on this element before the volume wraps up, because I am curious what this means for everyone involved. Doubly so for Weiss, since this was such a big moment overcoming her most personal antagonistic element in her life. Ultimately, Jacques' role in this grander story has been being Watts' pawn, and now things are coming to light. His breakdown allowed for a steady flow of focus shifting over to dealing with Watts and what's happening in Mantle, as well as showing a negative result of hiding and denying truths, versus Ironwood gaining a fair share of positives in sharing his. The understanding of the council, a common ground with Robin, the continued support of the heroes, and the clarity to focus on the most pressing issue at hand. It's a surprisingly overwhelming positive outcome for Ironwood's situation after all these episodes of some warring tension on these topics. But the RWBY were still wise to make sure that there is still a lingering air of caution with Ironwood's reactions. I felt bad seeing Ironwood clutching his face as he tries to wrap his head around his plans falling apart, and you can tell by his worn out tone, tired responses, and the look of concern on Oscar's face that were it not for the support provided and the need to protect Mantle, Ironwood could have reacted much more sourly to Salem being unkillable. Having plenty of moments with the general near breaking point avoids the good note of the scene ending on dismissing his feelings that began his secretive nature to begin with. And if there is to be some backlash to the hero's secrecy, which I hope is the case after all the talk about trust, I am glad to see that we do have this concerning aura to Ironwood's reactions to build upon in the future perhaps, and show that this wasn't a seamless conversation. A big benefit to the general's positive reaction is thanks to Oscar, who I feel had his strongest episode to date. The young lad was a credible support figure to Ironwood, sounding insightful, understanding, and inspiring. And it's great to finally see him in a more purposeful role after being left on the shelf for most of the volume. He needs more moments like these and his adorable chat with RWBY to make folks feel saddened that such a compassionate, tender heart has to deal with his own monumental struggles, and that memory melding tidbit was a brief but damn effective way to aid the scene whilst also reminding the viewer of his current sad fate. Robin got her fair share of strong comments, showing more of her passion, charisma, and earnest heart. The new Grimm looked especially menacing, and Cinder and Neo's arrival was a neat final note to end on, adding one more combustible element on top of an already lively tension setter for the fights to come, further emphasizing that now we have the political intrigue under wraps, it's time for things to get even more hostile in the city streets. And now let's hand out the episode awards, with the scene of the episode going to Weiss arresting Jacques for the many delicious layers on display, as Weiss, with the knight in tow, finally got her moment of glory in defiance of the man responsible for so much of her challenges. Then for the character of the episode, this for me has to go to Oscar. Like I said, this is his strongest episode so far, acting well as a guiding voice of reason for Ironwood, and as well having a nice bonding moment with RWBY that I feel will develop their relationship for the further trials to come. And on the note of Ironwood, I'm giving Jason Rose the voice acting gold star, as while the likes of Aaron, Jason Douglas, and Kara had shining performances as well amongst the other top draw talents, I cannot help but adore how well Jason was able to nail Ironwood's various highs and lows with such conviction and raw feelings. A fine performance indeed for the general in need. So that's all my thoughts on this episode. Another high quality chapter is in the books, and for a dialogue heavy entry, there was rarely a drop in quality. The emotions were on point, the directing was sublime, and some conflicts were left on a satisfying enough note while still leaving room for exploration in the future. It's crazy to think that we've only got 4 episodes left, and we still got so many pieces on the board. Mantle and Alice's fate is still up in the air, no pun intended. There's now 2 villainous pairs looking to cause more trouble in the streets. The Grimm are about to run roughshod in the city, and I can't help but feel that we still got some more trouble on the horizon for the heroes to deal with before we're all said and done. But for now, this was a cracker of an episode, and a fine way to return from the break. Here's hoping that as we hit the volume's crescendo, it ends with another bang. But these are just my thoughts, time to make sure you tell me yours. Were you satisfied with Jacques' defeat? Are you still worried for the kingdom's survival? And what do you think will happen now everyone is converging in Mantle? And while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on all things to do with RWBY, updates on future content for the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.